Good morning, everyone. I'm Gabrielle Kurlander, CEO of the All Stars Project and a member of the Women's Forum, and I'm honored to welcome you all to Free to Perform, Perform to be Free. Thank you for joining us. I want to thank the Women's Forum of New York for inviting me to be part of a series of conversations about the issues of racial equity, social justice, and diversity and inclusion, issues that are at the center of our national dialogue. In our lifetime, women are leading dramatic change. We first saw the Me Too movement transform how women are treated, and now with the Black Lives Matter movement, led by women of color, millions of people of all colors are calling for the end to racism and the structures that support it. How we move forward in addressing these issues matters. For our panelists, a big part of the how is performance. So today, they'll be sharing the impact of performance on their personal and professional lives and on the communities and businesses in the US and globally that are using it. As the CEO of the All Stars Project, I've experienced firsthand the power of performance to break down barriers and create common purpose. That's why I brought this panel together today. So I'm going to introduce each of them and then open up the conversation. Regina Carter is a Grammy award-winning jazz violinist whose love of music crosses every genre, a recipient of the MacArthur Genius Award, a Doris Duke artist, and a faculty member at the Manhattan School of Music. Regina believes that the violin, quote, isn't simply an improvisational vehicle, it's a passport to unexpected realms. Jared Glenn is a historian and activist who is outspoken on issues of race, education, and politics, and he is dedicated to bringing performance to young people growing up in poverty across the country. Multi-talented, Jared is a professional boxer, a theater director, and a member of the All Stars Project staff. Dr. Lois Holzman is co-founder of the Eastside Institute, an international center for a new kind of social activism, one that reinitiates people's capacity to grow and to transform their lives and their communities. She is the author of several books, including her most recent, The Overweight Brain, How Our Obsession with Knowing Keeps Us from Getting Smart Enough to Create a Better World. Maria Morris is the chair of the All Stars Project Board of Directors. She served as executive vice president at MetLife for 33 years before retiring in 2017. While there, she helped forge a national partnership with the All Stars Project. She's recognized as one of the most forward-thinking corporate leaders in the country, and Maria serves on the boards of S&P Global, Wells Fargo, and Resolution Life. Ivoryona Williams is an alumni of the All Stars. As an alumna, she was first introduced to our programs in 2017. She recently graduated from Fordham University, where she received a BA in political science. Ivory is a member of the All Stars Alumni Leadership Council, and her career goal is to work in the social impact space. Please welcome all of our panelists. Welcome to all of you. Great to have you here. And my first question is one I want to ask each of you to answer. What does free to perform, perform to be free mean to you? Regina, let's start with you.
I think about when I was growing up and taking music lessons, it was affordable to all of us. And as years went by, they took music out of the public schools. And so you had to be wealthy or, at least to be able to afford private lessons and private teachers and to get back and forth to your lessons. So I feel like free to perform, a lot of that has been taken away from young people, and they don't have that freedom because they don't have the means to be able to learn and perform to be free. For me, that's my way of expressing myself, my best way of expressing myself, and to getting issues across, bringing people together through music.
Thank you. Lois, free to perform, perform to be free.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. Thank you, Gabrielle. I think of deprivation and I think of neglect. That having the freedom to perform is a human right. And we allow that human right to infants and toddlers. And then we stop giving that right to almost everybody else. And it really means performing to be free is performing to be free of so many things, including being free of the roles that have been assigned to us and the communities that we belong to by virtue of where we are. And so performing to be free is performing to be human.
Thank you, Lois. Ivory, what are your thoughts?
I think Lois brought up many great points. And for me, I think of the pandemic that we're in right now. A lot of people have been feeling very either mentally stifled, creatively stifled in so many ways. And so to have the freedom to perform, to be your most authentic self, if you're an artist, to take to, any type of free platform to show off your craft, I feel like we're in an age where, although many of us are cooped inside, we're finding so many new ways to express ourselves and to speak to our own truths.
I'm honored to be here. I'm echoing sentiments that have already been expressed because I think they've been incredibly on point and poignant. What it means to me, especially as a father of an 11-year-old son, and getting to see him engage creatively in a way that I did not allow myself when I was younger. It touches on what Ivory just mentioned about feeling free to be or to dream whatever it is that you decide you want to live out for yourself, to free yourself of the expectations of society around you or the people around you, and also allows us, especially myself as an adult, to watch young people do that. It frees me of that expectation that I have for myself as a man, that process never ends, that even as adults, we are still performing, we are still dreaming, we are still trying to free ourselves of some sort of binding that either we or society puts on us. I think that the motto really embodies the idea of living freely and dreaming freely for yourself and for the world around you.
I echo what everyone said, and I kind of think of the free as the what and the perform as the how. We need to create a way that everybody can be free, and I feel like performance is one of the most basic things that we have inside of ourselves. And to me, it's kind of a leveler. It levels differences, it levels different communities, different socioeconomic backgrounds, frankly, even different talent levels.
Interesting. Well, we got a lot to pursue here. I want to start, Lois, with asking you a question now about belonging. Because I think in the diversity and inclusion space, corporations are more now recognizing that we need to add the importance of belonging. But speaking of the how do you create belonging, and what is the role for performance in that?
I think of belonging in two different ways, and performing is related to both of them. So all of us belong to communities, to organizations, to whatever, that we didn't have a choice to belong to. We are born and we belong to that family. And there's wonderful things about belonging to things that are already there for us, or to join something that is already there for us. And how do we learn to be there, and how do we get accepted, is by performing as if we belong. There's a second kind of belonging, though, that I think is much more continuously growthful and developmental in how people learn, and that is belonging to something that you and others created. So we belong to our family, but unless we all sit down at the dinner table or wherever and say, okay, what kind of family do we want to create? Then we're not creating what we're belonging to. And I think that the, 40 years or whatever of the All-Stars and many other projects, but the All-Stars in particular creates a developmental sense of belonging because people are creating it.
Interesting. Ivory, I want to go to you next. Tell us a little bit about your background and also where you come from and what performance has meant in your life, how you met the All-Stars.
Yes. So originally I was born and raised in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn, New York. And, I've always grown up in pretty like lower middle class neighborhood. And that's been, my reality. But coming out of Brooklyn, I went to college at Fordham University, which was a very jarring experience at times. But one thing I would say about that is at least when it comes to performance, bridging the gap between where I, came from to going to a very prestigious college, it was always a constant performance, no matter if I knew it or not. And in addition to that, I also started with the All-Stars Project in 2017, starting with the Development School for Youth. And that, for me, was very life-changing in ways that I didn't even realize until afterwards, because a part of the program is having an internship. And we all interned at, various corporations. And I had to perform, every day to fit a new role that was very new to me, that of becoming a professional and what that meant for, a young woman. And so I realized that throughout my entire life, performance has always been pivotal to, because I'm, taking on a new role. I'm becoming, a new person in a new environment. And so what performance has definitely done for me is it's always taken the edge off of, being in very uncomfortable situations. It has allowed me to, not be intimidated by people who have either more money than me or more career experience than me, and has really allowed me to connect with them. And over time, as you're performing, that character or whatever becomes you. It becomes as authentic as you are when you are, with your friends or with your family. And so throughout my life, I've always had to encounter new people, and performance will always be pivotal to me.
Ivory, you're so impressive. And I see Gabrielle may have had some connectivity issues, so I'll take the liberty of taking over some of the facilitation responsibilities. Jared, could you just talk a little bit about the role of performance in your life? And as you're starting to think about some of the things that you're doing as a program leader at All Stars in terms of using performance in new ways, especially right now in the world, can you help us understand how you're coming at it personally and then from an All-Stars perspective?
I found, both as a performer and as a person who's directed young performers, has been a way for them to exercise these new muscles about how they see themselves. And when you ask a young person to perform that has never performed before, the reaction you often get when you ask them to be someone that might be a little out of their norm or be a little wacky or just something that they never possibly imagined, and it's okay. That freedom to play, which they often don't feel. And then when they try to do it, they feel closed in. They're a little quiet. You got to kind of break that open to get them to be a little louder and a little bigger. I think the role that can play, and it might not pay dividends right away, but the role that can play is allowing them to see something greater in the path forward for themselves and what they might imagine themselves to be. It kind of touches on what Ivory seemed to have been talking about before, is that it really allows you to see this different world ahead of you and where you fit in it, and then learn how to perform in places that didn't seem so comfortable before. And what you find is that those places are not just on stage. Those places are in boardrooms, they're in universities. They're all around you, where these places where you don't feel like you belong or you didn't expect yourself to be. And those performative muscles really get flexed in those moments. And I think when we allow our young people and people in general to exercise more of those muscles, we'll get to see them blossom into something that none of us could have ever seen coming. It'll really expand our view of them and the world around us.
Great, Jared. Thank you. And Lois, I think of a couple of things that Jared said and Ivory said earlier about, the role of play, the role of performance. And, you've studied this for many years. Can you just give us your views on how play and performance really help humans develop?
My understanding of performance is that it's by performing as other than who we are that we become who we are, and that we constantly do that. And if we're stopped from continuously creating new performances of ourselves, performances of being a speaker, performance of it being a dancer, before you know how to do it. We're always doing things as very little children before we know how to do it, or even before we know that it's a thing to do, we're doing. And that's what performance, that's why it's so growthful, and we learn through performance. And then how do you reinitiate that? How do you create supportive environments that are pretty risk-free, that you can take a risk, but they're safe? How do you support young people and adults and even very old people to continuously create new performances that are both for their communities, and I think, and a lot of my work is for changing the world and getting rid of so many of the destructive and devastating aspects of life today.
Yeah. Thank you, Lois. I want to pivot just a little bit to go back to Regina as this amazing jazz violinist. And just a question for you. Jazz is a very improvisational form of music. And how do you use that as a way to bring performance into the conversation we're having here?
Well, it's interesting because jazz, as you said, is about improvisation, but there are rules that belong to it. So it's a language, and you learn to speak the language, and there's grammar to go along with that language. And we can express ourselves, and it's on stage we're learning, okay, who's speaking now? Are you listening? Do you get to, I get to have a comment, leave room for me to have a comment, check each other out. Are you looking at each other? Are you communicating? Are you respecting each other? So that you're learning on the stage, but then you take that out into your life, or you bring your life experiences onto the stage.
Ivory, I'd love to move to you specifically around young people's voices during this pandemic, whether it be on the internet or in the streets. And just do you have a point of view on where you are and how you think about that?
Of course. Yes. So as we all know that there has been, various injustices happening this year, whether that be Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and we have been seeing a lot of activity, especially in protests and also online, about people really expressing their grievances and calling for either state, local, or even federal, administrations to really take action. So it's really such a beautiful thing to see people feel like this is the time to get activated. This is the time to, connect with other people, whether it be their friends, their family, or even people who they meet for the first time in protests. And they all realize that we're in this together, that this is a massive performance of solidarity, of empathy, of compassion, of learning, and no one is necessarily an expert at this. A lot of people, are going into the role of becoming an activist, or becoming a voice even for their own family in a way. And as a young person, who sometimes wonders where's my voice in this? Or what can I do? And sometimes feel powerless, in a world that seems like it's not going to change anytime soon. And realizing that I'm not in this alone, that there are so many other people who are constantly contributing, and that I don't have to do this very grandiose performance. Just me showing up is sometimes enough to change, the trajectory of a lot of things.
Yeah, that's beautiful. The performance of showing up too, just knowing that you can perform and have the empowerment that when you show up, it's going to go okay and you can make a difference. Really powerful. I see our host back, Gabrielle. I'm going to hand the reins back over.
I was able to tune in a little while before I could come by back as your host. So thank you for Maria for picking up the ball and was listening with interest to what you were talking about. And Ivory, I just think it's so beautiful to bring out what you were bringing out about just the way when we think about, I think, protests and people coming out to demonstrations, we don't often think about the kind of the emotion of it and the performance of it and the coming together of it. And I love the way you spoke about that and kind of what young people are grappling with these days. Thank you for that. Maria, I wanted to ask you about your experience of using performance in the corporate setting and what you thought it's brought to the table there.
When I got into the corporate environment and started to look at what was working and what not working in the corporate environment, whether it was leadership and how we developed people of all types, whether it was inclusion and whether we had as inclusive of an environment and culture as we wanted, whether it was about representation and where we started to see representation issues kind of not be what they should be, I started to recognize that development through performance was something that the corporations could use as well. So I happen to have been at MetLife, but there was a number of corporations that specifically All Stars was working with around how do we connect corporate leaders with young people and create something new. And, at the beginning, this was it sounded very simple, development school for youth, right? Great, high school internships. So it seemed like an internship program. And you know what? It had nothing to do, the internships were phenomenal, but what we were creating didn't really have to do specifically with the internships. It had to do with connecting communities that would never have been connected before. And what was so beautiful about a high school student coming into a corporation to have a paid internship, number one, corporations didn't do much with high school students. They primarily did work at the college and above level. Number two, you're bringing in diverse communities with different backgrounds, and your supervisors all of a sudden need to be trained. And so All Stars steps in and trains the supervisors on how to have a developmental relationship with the young person. Wow, right there, that's a new performance because the supervisors really needed to get comfortable. So they performed until they were comfortable. And by the end of the summer, they're comfortable and it feeds on itself. So when I think about corporations, this is just one program, but corporations are looking for ways to be more inclusive and to have more inclusive cultures. That starts with people. And the ability to connect people one-on-one, but then also from a top-down perspective has really been, I think, eye-opening for a lot of corporations that we work with at All Stars. And what I think we have with something like performance is it gives you a way to have those conversations and get more inclusivity so that you can start building up the culture that you're looking for.
Yes, as you said earlier, it's a great performance, great equalizer. It's something that everybody can do, no matter what your, level of development is, what your background is. And, on that point, I know that, Jared, that you worked directing a play and you had young people in the play. I know one young man was on the autism spectrum and another person had just learned English as a second language very recently. And another person was on the stage for the first time. So how did you see, what did performance do for them in that context, in directing a youth on stage?
When we first began, there were varying levels of experience, as you say, and differing life experiences that brought them to that point. It was interesting to see a young man trying to learn and read English lines when he already didn't feel comfortable enough speaking them in his day-to-day life, that he was now going to perform in this. It was the ultimate performance. He was jumping in every way away from what he was normally used to. And then a young man who was on the autism spectrum and who had a hard time feeling confident expressing himself alone, let alone in a cast with other people, in an ensemble with other young people. What I think I found most riveting about it was not just that what they managed to discover in themselves, but the drive it gave them to want to be better. When they started to see some improvement from day to day, they started to realize that, wait, you mean to tell me I might be able to actually do this well rather than feel so self-conscious? You see that confidence build over time, and then seeing the support of each other, the experienced stage actors supporting the inexperienced, and then the joy they all had after the first show, put their arms around each other like, we did it. That was something that was just so, I can't put it into words. It was easily the most transformative experience of my life to this point. And I've been through quite a lot.
I wanted to actually, that development you're talking about and performance leading to that, I wanted to ask Lois, you about that, because, you know, you're a Vygotskian scholar, Lev Vygotsky, the early Soviet psychologist who spoke so much about people at different levels of development and ways in which they support each other. That's my layperson description, but tell us about that. How do children and adults do that together? What's that performance about?
Well, I've been thinking the last few minutes about emotional support. As Ivory was talking about the young people and protesters and how it is a performance, and it's a performance in many ways, including a very positive way, that it's a protest that isn't just against, but it's for something positive. And the toll it takes on people and the emotional support they need from others. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about the value of performance, just as Jared was talking, you know, and describing that putting together that play, and the emotional support that the cast and you gave to each other, and using each other and themselves and the all-stars to create a zone of proximal development, which is what Vygotsky's term was, that it's the activity of creating the supportive, growthful space that creates the growthful space. You know, they're not two separate things. And it's like improvisation. It's the stage you create for the story that's being told improvisationally on stage, if you're an improv comedian, is the story itself, you know, and how valuable it is, and how a lot of the work that I do in the States and around the world is helping people have performed conversations using improv. Like, how do you have a conversation where you're not just waiting for someone to stop talking so you can talk? You're not judging whether you agree or disagree, but you're actually listening to build something, to create something, and how needed that is in this very polarized place we are. And I know the All-Stars is starting something, and so many people in different parts of the US are floundering around and trying to play and perform with language and new ways to talk to each other. And I think that's all very positive.
Yeah, we're starting a new program called Operation Conversation that uses performance, just as you're saying, you know, to help people learn how to build conversations together, and to do that in particular about things that might be hot button issues or things that there's conflict about. How do we talk about things that are difficult to talk about? And, you know, in this day and age, I think we need to get better at not just having hard conversations, but first we have to learn how to have conversations.
Yeah.
And if we get better at having conversations, we can have hard conversations, we can have, you know, wonderful conversations, we can have easy conversations, we can have every kind. So build that muscle, if you will. That's really important. You know, I just was, on what you were saying about improvisation, Regina, I did want to ask you a little bit, as somebody who does improvisation, what is the performance of improvisation? You know, musically, what are you doing? Are you responding to the things you last did? Are you listening to other musicians? Are you, what drives that performance? Is there something, or is it, how does it happen? Because you're not reading the notes on a page.
No, but there are rules, there's things you learn, even if it's just, even if you say a sentence, we're working all together, and everyone you have your role, but everyone switches roles. So you have to be comfortable with that. So if the I might not have the drummer play, but we're all keeping time. We're all timekeepers, or the bass player, or sometimes I might play a walking bass line so the bass player can play. So everybody switches roles and you understand each other's roles, which is really important. You're listening to each other, so it's a conversation.
Mhm.
And if I only know 4 words, I'm hungry now. Is that, or 3 words? So you might say, I'm hungry now. Now I'm hungry. Hungry, hungry, I'm hungry now. So you take those, and maybe if I say that, I might say, I'm hungry now. And then someone else, the bass player, might say, me too. What do you, so it's a total conversation. You have a story in mind, you have the tune that you're playing, you know the words. It's important for all of us to know the lyrics, if they're lyrics, to what's the sentiment, and listening, really listening to each other. And that's a beautiful thing, not only on stage, but I think if going into corporations or to working with communities of people that are not musicians, and maybe just doing it with rhythms so that they're clapping and seeing how, okay, they have to respond to each other. It's fun. And you're not thinking about, oh, I have to be good at this, or I have to, you're not paying attention to yourself. And that's the most important thing, is to come out of your head and to pay attention to all of those around you. They're more important than yourself.
Yeah. Wow. Such a important point. I mean, just listening, I think we don't listen enough. And, but that was so beautiful how you described that. Thank you so much. And what you're saying about the structure, I think, is so important too, because I've learned as a theater director that, creativity happens best, I found, when there's structure to support it. It's not a free for all. There's some structure, and then you can respond and react and improvise and move with that. So I really appreciate that. Thank you. We're going to wrap up pretty soon. I wanted to ask Maria, could you share a little bit about, I know you signed on to a corporate letter with a number of other corporate leaders called Why America Can't Wait. It was an open letter from the business and philanthropic leaders of the All-Stars. Could you say a little bit about what the message was there and why that was important?
When I think about where we are in the world, a number of people from the board of directors came together, and we were people, corporate leaders, physicians, lawyers, academics, and we came together and said, in the wake of George Floyd and everything that was going on in the world, that we needed to take a stand, as we do every day in All Stars, to help other people recognize that there's a way to connect. And there's a way to have the conversations we were just talking about. And there's a way to actually start. And I go back to something Ivory said, which is, kind of the performance to just do something. And it's time. And what we wanted to say is that we were affiliated with All Stars, and we saw development through performance as one of those ways to start listening, to start connecting, and to start having these hard conversations that have to happen. The time is now, and everybody can get involved and connect in that way. Dozens of senior leaders across the country have signed on to this open letter saying, we see the power of connecting communities. And it starts with just performing, being there, listening, connecting. And so I would just, I think we're sharing it with the community. I would just say that, going back again to what Ivory said earlier, each one of us has a role to play, and what we believe, and what I believe strongly, is that how we play it will be the difference between making a difference and not making a difference. And I do believe that performance and the ability to perform, showing up, opening up, listening, connecting, building on each other, empowering each other, and then building something new from that is critical for our country right now. And I'm proud to be part of it.
As we close, I want to leave you, our audience members, with this. I want you to think about performing in your life too. When you are at breakfast with your kids, when you're presenting at the corporate board meeting, when you are having a conversation with your friend, think about that as a performance, as creating a performance. And I think you'll find the focus in that, the listening in that, the intentionality in that. So give that a try. Thank you so much again for joining us. Really appreciate it and hope to see you all again soon. Take care.
Thank you.